I wanted to start first by sharing my great hope for the future of Catholic schools. I've been involved in Catholic school renewal since 2005, and to see what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years is just amazing in terms of transformation of Catholic schools, really embracing the fullness of their mission. And one of the things that I am excited to be contributing to and bring about is having the Catholic educators wake up and realize that we are the best educators in the world. And the Catholic Church has the wisdom, the teaching experience of 2,000 years to bring us to that point. And so we shouldn't be following what the rest of the world is doing. We should be showing them what we do. And of course, taking the best from what they do as well. But we should be judging it and incorporating it and then being the real light to the world. So I'm grateful here to have Sister Kateri Rose join us. She is a principal at St. Joseph in Cottleville, and she's also with the Congregation of St. Cecilia in Nashville. And this is the living representative of the experience of the church. The sisters were founded in 1860 in Nashville, right? Mm-hmm. And they've had a continuous teaching history since 1860. So, Sister, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your order, your experience, the order's experience, and then how you see the state of the Catholic schools right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my name is Sister Kateri Rose, and I'm principal, as Dr. Seeley mentioned, at St. Joseph in Cottleville. It's my 6th year there. And I've been teaching since 2009 and administering in schools. And it's a great gift to be a part of that teaching mission of the church and of our congregation. Our congregation has had a continuous apostolate of education since 1860. We started in Nashville to form a school for young ladies to be educated in music and the fine arts. And that mission has really grown over the 150 plus years of our congregation all over the country. So we have several schools. I think we're in 20 some odd dioceses in the United States. We're also in a couple of countries in Europe, as well as in Canada and Australia, with that mission of education. So it's being a Dominican order. Our mission really is to preach truth. And for us, that is taking the form of teaching, mostly teaching in schools, elementary schools, secondary schools, and at the collegiate level. And our sisters, there's a great demand for the religious presence in Catholic education. I think more and more people desire to get back to the roots of our Catholic faith and the Catholic tradition in our schools. And so there's a desire to have that support of the religious presence. We know that just in the fullness of our Catholic faith, we have the vocation to the married life, the vocation of the priesthood, and the vocation to the consecrated life. And I think people desire that witness in their schools to give really a full representation of the universal church in their schools. And I think there's a great sense of hope in that people really do want the fullness of the faith for their students and their schools. And that's growing even outside of our country. The fact that we're in, I think, 4 countries in Europe that are extremely secular countries, where the sisters have said, you go to daily mass and it's all very elderly people and very sparsely attended. And that the sisters are able to bring this source of hope and rejuvenate the faith of these people who really do desire to know Christ and are getting excited about their Catholic faith again. So I think there is great hope, and I think that's a sign of hope universally in the church. And I think it's a great gift for us. There are 4 of us here in Cottleville. We just see that every single day, the longing for Christ that people have. And when our students receive the truth in any of their classes from any of their teachers, not just in religion class, as they're receiving the proclamation of the truth and God's goodness and God's mercy, they long for it, they hunger for it, and they're so grateful to receive it. And we're seeing that in this great desire of our students to be with Jesus in prayer, their desire to be with him in our chapel, to spend time in adoration. And they're bringing their parents back to the faith. In many, many cases, I can think of many that come to mind immediately, where the children are bringing their parents back to the faith because they want to be at Mass on Sunday. They realize how important that is. They want to see their friends and their teachers and be a part of this community of the church, the larger community of our church, as part of our school community. That's really part of the larger church.
Let me ask you one question. I mean, a huge difference today from 1960, 1860 is that the majority of the educators in Catholic schools are lay people now. Is there a particular piece of advice you'd offer from your experience as a religious teacher to help us as lay teachers in our work in Catholic schools?
I think the most important thing, and this kind of goes back to Dr. Blum's talk, is really that relationship with Christ. As Catholic school educators, we have to represent the presence of Christ. Like, Christ is the teacher in the classroom. And if we are not united to him, then that's going to be a much more difficult task. And so if we're united to Christ through prayer and the sacraments, we're more readily disposed to be his instrument in the classroom. And so I know I've encouraged our teachers to do that, to take advantage of the sacramental life, but then also together as a faculty, taking advantage of opportunities of faith formation. Mm-hmm. So that would be my word of advice, is just to stay close to Christ and to develop your life of prayer and the sacraments.
Excellent. Dr. Lehman, any thoughts on the state of the Catholic school renewal right now and hope for the future?
Sure. Well, I guess I share some of your excitement and enthusiasm, especially from the last 5 years, up to 10 years. I've been involved in the renewal for about the same amount of time and developed programs in different places. What I like to see is the focus among Catholic schools on retrieving their own tradition and returning to the foundations. So in the Masters in Catholic Education program, we begin with the Gospel of John and Jesus as the master teacher. And then that informs everything that we do. So following Christ as a teacher, and then also being a friend of God, right? So there's a strong emphasis on those virtues. And we're just seeing more and more Catholic schools that are looking for that in particular. Mm-hmm. They're seeing the renewal, they're seeing it grow. It's widespread now in the United States. It's also growing tremendously overseas as well. So this past fall, I was in Peru and invited to speak at a conference and do some consulting with them. And so throughout Latin America, there are universities as well as K-12 schools that are seeking to reclaim their heritage, to be, Catholic right down to the roots.
And it's really funny to have they're looking to America.
They're looking to America
to reclaim their Catholic heritage.
Exactly. Yeah. So we want to see what's happening in the U.S. happen in our schools and our countries as well. So it's a very exciting time.
Dr. Blum?
Well, thank you, Dr. Seeley.
You're welcome.
Good. By disposition, I'm sort of the glass half empty guy.
I had a feeling you were giving us the puddle glove moment.
I think that part of what's so encouraging and stirring for me is to see Catholic teachers and administrators and priests who are involved at the diocesan level or at the parish level making decisions about schools and so forth, to see a kind of heightened seriousness about how important these institutions are. And so all around the country, dioceses are facing problems with parish schools that don't quite have enough children in them because of the dynamics of the parish boundary and where Catholics are living and these kinds of big seismic issues that are just under God's providence and we can't control, right? And we're also seeing pressure on high schools in Catholic settings, notably in Denver, right? Some of us have worked closely with a very fine high school that's closing at the end of this school year, not by anybody's fault, but because of these larger changes in our society and so forth. And what's so beautiful for me is to see that sort of never give up attitude showing up over and over again, where whether it's lay teachers or priests or benefactors or groups of parents who are rising to the occasion and saying, there's something really precious here. There's a pearl of great price. And we need to keep it alive, even if it's in a slightly different institutional setting, even if it's in a homeschool co-op or it's in an merged institution or something, an independent school. We're going to keep this alive. And that's an important piece of the puzzle too.
Okay. All right. Anybody like to ask questions or offer some thoughts, comments?
One of the things that I I'm seeing is this movement towards classical Catholic education. And I got interested in it after homeschooling my own 3 girls for 3 years. And that was like my aha moment. It's like, how can we as a Catholic school, are there publishers out there that basically publish books that are geared towards Catholic school? Because there used to be that way back when, and then everything just, went secular. And so that now I teach in a high school, and I have to be very particular on which excerpts I'm basically putting out there.
What's your subject area?
Well, I teach advanced placement composition, language and composition. And so we do a lot of speeches and nonfiction text. And I have to kind of like skip over the stuff that are, and then if I do selection, I'm like, okay, what's our Catholic view on it? But then it's like, not all teachers, in essence, are, as you said, formed. And so is there a way that we can have textbooks again, or is there a movement somewhere where we have textbooks that are geared towards?
Yeah. Let me just highlight the importance of the question. If you know about the Holy See's teaching on Catholic schools, the little brown book by Archbishop Michael Miller, among the 5 marks of his Catholic school, number 4 is there needs to be a Catholic worldview throughout the curriculum. It's not just a matter of making sure your religion is faithful, but your literature and your history and your science and your composition all are contributing to the overall formation. So I think that this is a very important question. How can we do that if we're just taking secular textbooks in all the other areas? So thoughts about the question?
Oh, well, I mean, you're the one who's been involved in the Catholic textbook project.
I don't want to toot my own horn. I want you to toot it, okay?
You just want me to advertise my own book, which is I'm delighted to do. So thank you for that question. It's profoundly important. There's no one publisher, but there are a half dozen really good publishers out there. The Augustine Institute, one of them, who are doing great work. My own very small contribution was to help put together an 8th middle school natural history textbook for biology class called Nature's Beautiful Order. And that's available from Memoria Press. Now Memoria Press is not a confessedly Catholic publisher. Okay, it's what they put on the masthead, as it were, is the classical branding device, right? But they're Catholic friendly, let's just say. So there's a lot of really good material from Memoria Press, but again, Augustine Institute, Ignatius Press, Sophia Institute Press, and the Catholic Textbook Project.
Catholic Textbook Project connected with the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education. So they have a whole series of history textbooks for Catholic schools, and also a related science curriculum now that they've, this is also out of the non-Catholic world, but it's Catholic-friendly Novare. And I think that this is one of the great things sort of in this second wave of Catholic school renewal is getting those curricular materials out there. Though I think the most important thing is teacher formation. If the teachers are well grounded in their faith and then see how whatever they're teaching is connected to the formation of these students, their loving encounter with the truth, which should happen in math class and science class and history class, the teachers are going to be able to communicate it. We'll get them better materials, but they're the most important ones. Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah, one element that's come out, especially with the development of classical education, which is decades old now in the renewal, they focus principally on the trivium, right? And so that's been informing everything that's developed in terms of curriculum. With the last, say, 5 to 10 years, there's been a desire to see what the quadrivium might do to help us, especially given the divide that is often seen between theology and natural science and so forth. So we've been involved in a kind of quadrivium renewal as well. And that curriculum is well down the road, but they're working on it to develop that sort of thing, and then a fully integrated mathematics and natural science curriculum that would accord with theology and the rest as well. But that's down the road a bit.
Yeah, I was going to really say almost the same thing, that's why the formation of our teachers is so important, because there are a lot of textbook materials and resources that just really aren't fantastic, or at least not in whole. And so it's really incumbent upon us to form our teachers well, because they're the ones that then impart that curriculum to our students. And it's really coming from their witness and their prudence, and being able to take those resources and materials or other resources and materials and impart the truths to our students, and communicate the gospel through that. So.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
One thing in contemplating very big things, the state of the world, state of education, state of raising your children in a Catholic environment, is it seems to me a fundamental lack of responsibility on the part of parents to kind of, not lay it on someone else's feet. We are the primary educators of our own children. Do you have any recommendations for forming parents as well along the way with their children? I mean, the Word of Life books that we've been using at our school, I have actually, I consider myself a fairly well-formed person, but I've actually found that I'm learning along with them. So not counting that as a resource, what would be some other recommendations?
Yeah, I think.
You want to start?
Yeah, our teachers do a very good job of trying to find those ways to invite the parents into their child's academic intellectual formation, and even their spiritual formation that happens at school. And so to kind of help put that back on them and open up those conversations with their children at home. So the teachers can actually do a lot to invite the parents into that. And then other things that we do at our school too, that invite the parents into that learning environment and into that formation of their children. Very simple things, family holy hours that we do to invite the parents back into their child's spiritual formation and teaching their children how to pray. So we realize in that, like, we're actually often teaching the parents how to pray and how to pray then with their children. So we try to do little things like that just to form the parents, and then hand it off to them just a little bit more so that they feel more competent to do that. A lot of times they don't feel like they're qualified to do it, but really they are qualified by their vocation to do it. So we just try to do what we can to hand over things to them to open up dialogue at home with their children.
Do you have an example of something a teacher does to invite parent involvement?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to use an example of the two sisters here. They've been doing Sunday gospel reflections with their students. So they invite their students and the parents to read the gospel reading for the upcoming Sunday together, and then to have conversation. There's some guiding questions on that to get them thinking about the scriptures and get their own reflections, both parent and student. There's no right or wrong. Nobody has to have the right answer. Just what is the Lord speaking to you in this, or what questions do you even have about this? So just inviting them to sit down with the scriptures and then to participate in Mass together as well.
That's great. I'll throw in a couple of thoughts. One is encouraging the parents to read to their kids, even giving them book lists or assignments. We want you to read this chapter of this book with your students, and then a second thing is, this is something I did to my kids. I annoyed them all the time, but every day when they came home, what did you learn today? Tell me one thing you learned today in school. And just asking that question made them know they had to think of something coming home, but also allowed me to keep up with what they were learning. I'm also really delighted to hear that having that conversation with the kids actually is taking what's strong in the school, in the life of the school, and bringing the parents into it, even to the point of conversion or reconversion. Mm-hmm. That's really a wonderful thing. Dr. Blum?
Yeah, well, the glass half empty approach here. So if we think about the Catholic school, say 75 years ago, right? It's a neighborhood parish school in a Catholic culture that's often an ethnic Catholic culture, right? And sort of the whole life of the family is being lived out under various Catholic signs and rhythms. Okay, and often in these Catholic neighborhoods, it was an extended family life, right, with Uncle Mortimer and various other people around. That's all gone now, really. I mean, unless you're in New Melly or St. Genevieve, right? But in our suburbs, we don't have that anymore, and we have this very different problem, which I take it is behind the question, or it's certainly been behind the question as I've heard it posed in the past, which is the Catholic school education that we're offering is viewed as a commodity by parents who are perfectly happy to purchase it at the going rates because of X, Y, and Z values that they see in it, which may not have anything to do with our Lord. Okay. What do we do with parents like that? Well, we invite them, we're patient with them, we pray for them. Okay. But I think also as our schools become perhaps a little smaller, although not at St. Joseph's in Cottleville, but in some of these other schools, they're a little bit smaller, right? With a smaller, more close-knit group of teachers and administrators who are much more focused on the real task of Catholic education than perhaps they were 30 years ago, because they have to be, right? In order to keep that school alive, you really got to want to be there, and you got to know why you're there, and so forth. Well, this is starting to create an ambiance that the parents they're going to see, and if we're inviting them into that, if we're trying to start to get to know the parents by name, for instance, then they're going to feel not just as customers or clients, but as potential members of the community. So I think there is an evangelical opening there that's new to this little moment we have in our society, and it may be very hard to do, but it is there, I think.
Add anything?
Well, I think much has been said already that is what I would have shared. But one thing to kind of bring out as a concrete example is to have families invited to an evening event where there's a reading, and then they can be together with their children reading a book with the faculty to kind of invite them into the intellectual and the moral formation that they're receiving.
Yeah, thinking of that, some of the things said, and then the Puddleglum part over here. I think that you want to focus. You're going to focus on really getting parents who are open to being engaged into not just being a part of the education themselves, but also uniting with other parents, and so you have a smaller group that's going to be open to this, and you want to guide them, inform them, and they'll just start to share their enthusiasm and kind of build up an expectation that'll have a broadening effect. I mean, there are going to be parents you're never going to reach, I think, on this, but to don't feel the failure because you're not succeeding with all the parents, but rather build a core of success and let that start to spread out over time, I think.
Very good.
Let's see. I think we have. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm saying Mass will be fine.
Oh, very good. We got all day then.
So here's a live tension right now in St. Louis, and I think in other places too, that I'd just be kind of curious to hear the wisdom from the past. Catholic identity of some of our Catholic schools that now are serving in some ways as a vehicle for impoverished non-Catholics to escape poverty. Mm-hmm. So I think Catholic identity, it's all about the Lord, right? It's all about Jesus. But I think about the difference as a priest when I walk into a John Paul II, to a Cottleville, to a Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, where 95% of the children are non-Catholic minorities. And we're trying to sustain that school out of a sense of social justice and dignity of the person. So can you talk about the golden thread maybe, or like when we talk about the Catholic identity, if you were sent as a panel to assess the Catholic identity of schools, but they're in these different lived realities, what does that kind of look like?
Mm-hmm. I'll start with one thought. I did work with a school in Kentucky where they were making a serious transformation of their school into a fully Catholic life, but they had 70% of their students were non-Catholics, and I think their attitude was, we just made it clear that we welcome them in, but they're in a Catholic school, and we're not going to be less Catholic because we've got 90% non-Catholics. We're still going to be as Catholic as we're going to be very Catholic, including they would have adoration time, and bring people in. You can sit quietly, respectfully. And they didn't lose anybody, I don't think. I mean, they really attracted. I think that the more they were living that way, the more they actually attracted even the non-Catholic students. And the parents understood it. They said, yeah, okay, that's part of the deal, right? All right,
You
Jeff.
want the gloomy answer.
Okay, all right.
So what, in Memphis, a very different approach was taken, which was to hand over or sell in some way a bunch of these inner city schools to a charter school group. Now, when one hears that right away, you think, oh, this is terrible. The kids aren't going to get a Catholic education. And that would be true, from 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 or something, right? But I wonder, the church is wealthy in property in certain parts of the country, St. Louis among other places, but then maybe straining on an income side or a budgetary side, right? And is there a way we can flip the script and say, okay, we're gonna give away or sell the real estate in the building in return for certain continuing rights, right? A naming right to the school, a certain right to after school programs, say. Who knows? There's all kinds of creative solutions that are possibly out there. And I think that what a creative approach like this might lead to is a slightly different kind of tension, maybe a more fruitful tension. Instead of this high expectation that everybody who works for this school be Catholic when the students aren't even Catholic. Instead, maybe you flip the expectations and it's, well, the church has access to this property because they gave it to these kids and their families. And what the church is doing is offering these after school programs or offering the summer camps or offering something. And we've got a perpetual agreement with the church that we will allow them to keep offering these things. And so anyway, that's, I think we do need to get outside the 9 dots a little bit with some of these questions. So thanks for asking.
Jeff?
So could I have a follow-up to your question, asking you a question? In the hypothetical, to what extent are those in positions of leadership on board with the change, right? The school board, the headmaster, principal, the teaching faculty, because I think that would have a huge difference in terms of how you would approach it in terms of prudence. So what are you thinking of? Once that there's already, in a way, someone in leadership that's wanting it to go in that direction or not?
I think it's actually just kind of, as Dr. Blum was saying, by lived reality over time, what was a little Catholic enclave community school has in the last 60 years become a non-Catholic neighborhood. That school is still sitting there. And I think we still, so I had Mass at St. Norbert's on Wednesday morning, right? And 10 of the students received communion from me. The rest did not. They all came up and received a blessing instead. And so I think when we talk about how you engage parents in transmitting the faith, well, these aren't Catholic families. And so this is the exposure that they have to the Catholic faith. So I know I'm not even necessarily answering your question, but I think that as far as teacher formation and the mission of the Catholic Church in these different circumstances, I think to kind of train these teachers in a specific way to see themselves as missionaries equipped for a non-Catholic audience might be different than the teacher that's working with a homeschool co-op. So same mission, different lived realities. But that's a tough net for somebody like Julie Softner to figure out how to cast and train teachers that are in all these different realities. So I don't know if there's even sub-formation that needs to kind of go on based on the type of lived reality you're teaching it.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that is very helpful for me. One of the things we're trying to do now is to develop all kinds of formation from free offerings to graduate credit, and then be able to deploy those or offer those based upon the situation of individual teachers or administrators, and then also of faculty. If something would generally be good for faculty, then perhaps something in professional development. But it is a little tricky, right? Because each instance is going to have to be a little different, I think.
So let me go back to the Catholic worldview throughout the curriculum idea, the church is very clear. That doesn't mean that you're doing catechetics in every different class. You actually want to be focusing on what's worthwhile in this subject. What's true, good, and beautiful in this subject? And if you bring those things out, Christ is there, even if you're not talking about him. So if you're teaching your students your subject area in a way that's engaging and powerful and makes them excited, you're building great bridges for them into a spiritual world. So I think that's something you can do in all settings. So there was a school. I was at Thomas Aquinas College as a tutor for a long time. We started to get this stream of excellent, amazing, on-fire students from a charter school in Phoenix. Why are you all coming here? And they said, well, we had Euclid taught to us in freshman year by a guy who was passionate about geometry and truth. And that set us on fire for a love of learning. And now more than half of them are Catholic. And he didn't talk about his Catholic faith at all, but that's just what he did. Sorry, John.
Could I follow up on that immediately? Yeah, so we talk about an integrated curriculum and an integrated approach, right? And that implies a wholeness, right? It's in the word, integer, a whole number. And I think that's pretty vital. The way we're trying to approach it is, yes, you need to have the theological foundation and be informed by the church and her teachings throughout, but especially think about that whole as being in a way prior to any part, right? So whatever your subject is, whether it's theology or mathematics or natural science, do you have that vision of the whole that's informing what you're doing? Do you know what the other teachers are doing in other classes so that you can be talking about that in your class and helping them to integrate it? Those kinds of things are pretty vital.
So, Sister, I want to ask you a particular question. This is not a new situation for teaching orders. I mean, many of the success of the missionaries was that they would establish schools, and the local population would send their kids there because of the excellence of the education. So it's part of. So Ben, we have a history of that. Do you have any thoughts about that? I don't know if your order has been engaged in that yourself.
Yeah, and I would say even for us in Cottleville, like a lot of our families identify as being Catholic, but are they really? And so we're still engaged in an evangelizing mission, even where we are. I mean, so Mother Teresa speaks about the greater spiritual poverty, and so we experience that a lot. But many of the schools that we teach in, there's tremendous poverty, and we're revealing the love of Christ wherever we go. We have a responsibility to preach the gospel. And you even think about Mother Teresa, who went to Calcutta, India, and not to convert, but to bring the love of Christ. And so even in some of these schools, like Father Martin is speaking of, I mean, we still have a responsibility as a Catholic Church to bring the gospel message to those who desire to hear it and receive it, to educate and form these souls. And so, I mean, we still do that today in many of the schools in which the school I came from was much more diverse and had a much larger population of non-Catholics, Muslims, Hindus, Protestants, Baptists. So it was much more diverse. And yet we fearlessly proclaim the gospel, and we are living our Catholic faith, and they desire the wholeness of the education that we're giving, and the intellectual formation we offer, but also the spiritual rigor that we offer.
All right, well, I think we should wrap up now officially. Okay, all right, okay.
I teach at St. Norbert, my fourth year there because my other school closed. And in that time, 8 children have become baptized, and their families too. So it is important to,
Wonderful.
not to have just all Catholics. They want to come into it. So,
That's good. Okay, well, let's thank our panelists for bringing us this today.